What is up, y'all? Welcome to my review for Doom the Dark Ages. So it is finally time to jump into this game and tell you my overall thoughts on anything and everything that Doom the Dark Ages has to offer. There will be full spoilers from this point forward. In fact, you're going to see gameplay footage of a few different levels later on in this game. So if you have not played Doom the Dark Ages and you want to go into this game as spoiler free as possible, this is your opportunity to push pause, go play the game, and then come back once you have completed your tour through hell. But I will be talking about 4 different aspects of this game. We're going to be jumping into the performance, the gameplay mostly, and that includes all the collectibles and secrets that you will find along the way. We'll talk briefly about the soundtrack and the story, and then at the very end, I will give you my final impressions and score for Doom the Dark Ages. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to start off with the performance. Graphically, it's pretty in line with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. The details and the textures of the environments are definitely improved, especially when you get up close and personal with some of the bigger enemies. The textures really do jump out at you and make this world feel lived in. It's depressing and gross in the best way possible. Now, I did not have too many issues with the performance overall. There were a few times I had to close out the mission, go back to the main menu, and then reload the mission, mostly due to freezing. There was a glitch where I got stuck in a wall and slowly just fell through the map. Had to reload the game on that one, but that was funny to actually watch. The frame rates have been pretty good throughout. I never had an issue with frame rate drops or lags. The gameplay and combat loop was smooth from beginning to end. I always felt like I was on an even playing field with the demons of hell and never held back by the game not performing well. So, was it the best overall performance that I could have gotten out of this game? No, but it definitely did not ruin my experience with this game. And speaking of the game, is Doom the Dark Ages fun to play? The bread and butter of any Doom game is the combat loop, and whether or not that can keep your attention for those 15, 20 plus hours. Doom the Dark Ages did a great job of keeping my interest and attention for almost 30 hours that I spent ripping and tearing my way through Prince Azrak's demon hordes. First off, I want to mention several of the weapons that you have the opportunity to use during your playthrough. One of the big notable differences between this game and previous iterations is the shield. You can upgrade your shield throughout the game. Basically, it's like Captain America's shield. You can throw it and mow down several imp stalkers, soldiers, or zombies to grab additional resources. But once you upgrade it, you can toss that thing at the stronger enemies and it will get stuck in them and continue to do damage over time. Not only does this look awesome as hell, it never gets stale taking out 10 fodder enemies at once. Parrying with your shield is an absolute must in this game. I am not a guy that typically parries much of in any game that I ever play. I'm really just an offensive kind of player. I will go in there and just try to beat the shit out of you as quickly as I can. But your experience will be much better if you learn the parrying system, and it's really not that difficult, especially for someone that hates parrying. And parrying becomes a huge component later on in the game when hordes of stronger enemy varieties are railing you sideways in tight quarters. This, combined with some of the guns that you gain access to, really makes for an interesting and fun gameplay loop. I mentioned upgrades. There are 4 shield runes you will have by the time you hit credits. You have the ground fissure, exactly what it sounds like. It sends a fissure towards an enemy or group of enemies. You have the holy swarm, which sends a swarm of ethereal daggers towards nearby enemies. I didn't play with this as much because I didn't upgrade it until much later in the game. I think it was right when I was trying to get the platinum, so I had already beaten the game. I really liked Holy Swarm. If I had to rewind the game and play through it again, I would stick with Holy Swarm more so than probably some of the others on this list. Holy Swarm just looks dope, but it's also pretty good when it comes to damage. Your next rune, if you are a huge fan of Predator and you've always wanted to be like Predator, this is your chance because we have the auto turret, which pulls up a little turret on your back, just like the Predator, and starts firing at a single target. You have the Heaven Splitter, which sends a bolt of lightning, shocking a group of enemies and leaving them stunned for you to go in for the kill. This was my least favorite out of the four. Holy Swarm and Auto Turret were easily my favorites. You also have the ability to close large gaps in between enemies by activating the shield charge, which propels you very quickly into an enemy. The lesser enemies will explode upon impact, but it will dish out some decent damage to the stronger ones. Now, I know the huge tagline for this game was to stand and fight. You know, in the last couple games, it was run and gun, jump and gun. This one was stand and fight. The addition of the shield, the runes, and combining that with the shield charge, it makes this gameplay experience super fast. There is no slowness to any of the combat in this game, which is what I thought was going to be when I bought the game originally. I thought it was going to be much slower in pace. Not the case whatsoever. But what about the melee options? It's not necessarily anything new to the world of Doom, but melee attacks do work differently in the Dark Ages, where your attacks have a cooldown effect. Early on in your playthrough, you will be able to use your melee option a few times. But then once it's fully upgraded, you will move through a couple different melee options, such as the Sauron-style flail, and then eventually to the amazing Dread Mace, which I had so much fun just absolutely devastating folks with the Dread Mace. I honestly loved that addition to this game. And once you use the Dread Mace, it takes a long time for you to be able to use it again, but you get all of your ammo restored in the process. So you swing that thing and kill one enemy, you get every single weapon restored fully with ammo. This really helped me with completing the master challenges for all of the weapons. While I won't dive into every single weapon here that you will receive through your playthrough, I will say I thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay loop in every chapter. Doom the Dark Ages is not a game that you can put down for a week and then come back for a few hours and then put it down again. All of the weapons have different uses for different enemy varieties, so you're finding yourself switching between all of your weapons in every battle. I really love this because typically I'll just pick my favorite weapon and then I'll roll with that most of the time. They really did force you to use everything in your arsenal. And like I said, you can't take breaks in this game because you have to stay in that groove of swapping between weapons when you see specific enemies, such as the soldiers with plasma shields. You can quickly kill them with your plasma weapons, or if you see a soldier with a shield, you can pummel their shield with your shredder machine gun, which heats up that shield, and then you can throw your shield and decimate a large group of enemies. One aspect of the combat system that I was pretty disappointed in is something that just about every single Doom fan out there loves about the Doom series, and that is glory kills. It is a huge notable mechanic in the Doom series to have glory kills, and that is largely absent here. Yeah, there are glory kills here and there, but they are really devoted to the boss fights and the demonic essence battles. I gotta say, it's a bummer that this was not more of a focal point in the game. It just seems like this is one of those core mechanics of a Doom game that should never be touched. And just a couple minutes ago, I mentioned master challenges. These are the challenges for every single weapon, and in order to get the platinum trophy for this game, you're gonna have to master every single weapon. While I think the chapter challenges are easy but bland for the most part, that's not the case for the weapon master challenges. What I really appreciate from these challenges is it forces you to really utilize the weapon upgrades and maximize the potential of all of these weapons. I would knock out one master challenge at a time, and it really helped me grasp the full potential of my arsenal. And while I do think that the chapter challenges are easy and bland, like I said, I think it allows you to grasp the combat system much quicker than if you didn't. It gives you little tips along the way of how to quickly dispatch all of your enemies. One important aspect of any Doom game, the collectibles and the secrets. I decided to 100% my playthrough of Doom the Dark Ages, and I felt like once you get the hang of looking in every nook and cranny and catching on to where they place certain collectibles, it's much easier to knock them out as you go along, but it does add several more hours to your playthrough. But good news, you can go back after you hit credits and pick up any missed items in each chapter. You will find yourself searching high and low for codexes, toys, rubies, which are the standard weapon upgrade items, wraith stones, which are the mastery upgrades for your weapons, demonic essences, which upgrade your ammo, armor, and your health, and last but not least, the weapon skins. Now, I do think the weapon skins are kind of lame here. There's not a whole lot of variety of those skins to make me care enough about them, so it really felt more tedious than anything. I mean, at a certain point, I really stopped caring about changing out the skins for my guns just because they looked so boring. But a new introduction to the Dark Ages are the Atlans and a dragon for you to hop on at certain points. The Atlan is a huge mech that you can take control of to fight kaiju-sized demons. Think Pacific Rim there. And while these fights can initially be fun and cool, they do quickly lose their appeal and steam as the combat mechanics are too simple. You're just button smashing and dodging and occasionally shooting huge ass guns. So while they do look awesome, like these fights look incredible, but eventually they just become kind of boring. Flying on your dragon is pretty cool though. There were a few different chapters where flying was a huge central part of the mission, whether that's destroying the hell ships and carriers or these enormous tentacle enemies. This gameplay mechanic never really got old for me. But the good news is these sequences are infrequent and don't last long in comparison to the rest of the game. So while I do think that combat mechanics of the Atlan is too simple, it gets a little monotonous as you play through those missions. It's so infrequent that it never really drags down the pacing of the game. I'm never going into a chapter thinking, oh, great, I have to play as the Atlan again. And while you can have the greatest combat system of all time, you can make it fun and compelling throughout an entire playthrough, you have to have a good variety of enemies to keep everyone's attention spans for those playthroughs. Any successful Doom game lives or dies by its combat, but the enemy variety plays a huge part in your enjoyment of a 20-plus hour Doom adventure. I really enjoyed the slow roll out of demons as I made my way through these 22 chapters. They were all unique enough to really make you think about how to kill them. You have the bitch-ass stalker imps, soldiers, and zombies, but then as the story progresses, you get introduced to battle knights, cyber demons, revenants, and more. And speaking of which, I do have to get something off my chest for just a second, that there were a few enemy types here that really just frustrated me. Not because these demons were hard to kill, but most of them are just more tedious than they have to be in the middle of a huge battle when you're getting fucked from every angle. Like the Revenants phasing in and out and shooting at you constantly. Or the Komodo and Cosmic Baron literally fucking you sideways as the most aggressive enemy types in the game. But don't get it twisted. This never pissed me off enough to ruin my experience. And with all that being said, I want to segue into the difficulty levels and accessibility options of Doom: The Dark Ages. I really appreciated the different levels you could choose from, but you could also further customize your experience by adjusting how much damage you receive or dish out, or how aggressive demons are towards you. It really lets you customize the game to however easy or hard you want it to be. And this really helps you out when you're playing through the game. Now, moving on to one of the most disappointing aspects of Doom: The Dark Ages, the soundtrack. Unfortunately, this was such a huge disappointment to me. I've heard some people say the soundtrack is fantastic, but for the most part, any fan of Doom that has played this game, a majority of them have said that the soundtrack is absolutely atrocious. When I think about the Doom series, I think about fast-paced action, never stopping or standing still, awesome guns and gameplay, and a soundtrack that makes me want to punt a fat kid in Kmart. Mick Gordon did not return for this game to bring his blistering score. Instead, it was a music production team called Finishing Move. The whole soundtrack is just bland and uninspiring. In fact, I turned off the music and just had my Spotify playing in the background, and it was a much better experience. one of the worst soundtracks to a game that I have heard in a very long time. Now, I will throw a little disclaimer out there. I came from playing Clair Obscur Expedition 33 to playing this game. Expedition 33 has one of the best soundtracks ever made. So going from that game to this game, it was pretty jarring. And last but not least, I want to briefly talk about the story. Overall, it's fine, but there's a point after the first few chapters that I felt a little bored by where this story was going. It's more lore building than anything. So in that sense, there is some surprisingly decent depth there. Bridges the gap between Doom 64 and Doom 2016. We get a more fleshed out world with this entry where there are human companions helping fighting demons, whereas typically it's just the Doom Slayer. They do make it feel like there's an all-out war between the humans and demons. Prince Azric isn't really all that great of a villain to me until the very end, but he's mostly a throwaway antagonist for a majority of the playthrough. But guys, overall, Doom the Dark Ages was an absolute blast from beginning to end. Is it a perfect Doom game? No, not by a long shot. But I always found myself thinking about the next time that I could dive back into hell to take out more hordes of demons. I think the game might be a little too long. Maybe cutting a chapter or two would have helped with the pacing, but ultimately I'm not super mad about the time that I spent playing this game. The soundtrack and the lack of glory kills are a big letdown here and could have made this game a lot better. I wasn't all that crazy about the story, but it was okay. But the reason I play Doom and come back time after time is the gameplay, and I thought that ID Software knocked that out of the park. It was so thrilling and exciting going from battle to battle, having to utilize every weapon in my arsenal in order to be successful. I think Doom the Dark Ages is the epitome of an 8 out of 10 game, and that's going to be my final score. But guys, what did you think about Doom the Dark Ages? Let me know down below your thoughts about the game. What did you like? What did you hate? What kind of elements do you hope for in future installments? Let us know down below. And while you're there, hit that like and subscribe button. That really helps us grow the podcast, and we would be greatly appreciative if you did that. And also in the description below, we have links to all of our social media accounts. Go there, like, subscribe, follow, do all of that. But all in all, I really do appreciate y'all joining me for this review. Thank you for supporting this channel, and I will catch y'all next time on another episode. Laters.